Hi everyone, welcome to my monthly video chat where I sit down with the best and brightest of the Boston perinatal birth community. And today I am here with Rebecca Urban. I'm super excited to introduce you to her. She is a birth educator and a doula. Hi Rebecca, how's it going?
Hi Angie, thanks for having me on.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here because you and I have shared clients for probably years at this point, and
Yep.
so I'm excited to get the opportunity to talk to you more and learn more about your services, but also so that my clientele can know more about what you offer because there's so much great stuff available to them.
Thanks.
Yeah, so one of the primary ways that I feel connected to you is through your birth education, and I know that you teach the Bradley method. So can you tell me a little bit about why you chose to learn and teach the Bradley method, and kind of what is it about the Bradley method that is really special to you and that you believe in, that you kind of invested your time and effort into that method as opposed to other birth methods?
It's a great question. I think I teach it, or I started teaching it because it really worked well for me. And I've been really blessed with having 5 wonderful and different birth experiences. But I really think that especially the first one would have been dramatically different had I not taken Bradley method classes.
Yeah.
And when I was pregnant with my first child, which was about 10 years ago now, everybody in my corporate work world seemed to be pregnant along with me, but they were a little further along. And I started paying attention to their birth stories, and a lot of them, were hoping for these low intervention births, and all of them ended up having not their ideal birth. And they were all experiencing a lot of interventions, and in some cases cesareans. And it was sort of disappointing to see. It was disappointing for me to see them working towards, this ideal, and then ending up with an experience that was dramatically different, and really trying to process that and reconcile this traumatic experience with the best day of their lives, having their babies. So it piqued my attention and my curiosity. And at the time, one of my closest friends was pregnant with her second child, and she was due a few months before me. And she called me right after the birth of her baby and said, "Rebecca, we just had our baby. We had such a wonderful experience. You're not going to believe it. And my husband was helpful in catching the baby with the midwives. And look, I'm going to send you a picture right now." And I thought, oh my gosh, I can't believe she's going to send me a picture on my computer. And here I am in my corporate office. And, these beautiful pictures of her husband being involved and them crying tears of joy over their baby just really brought me to tears. And it moved me. And I asked her, quite literally, what drug she had had. Because whatever drug she had was the one I wanted in my birth plan. And I was really, she had like this water birth in this tub, and I thought, oh, she must have taken a drug that allowed her to do that, and how nice it would be to be able to take a drug that would allow me to have a birth like that and still have mobility. And I just couldn't believe the expression of joy on her face was natural and raw, and it was. So she said, "What do you mean? What drug did I take? Don't you understand? I took the Bradley method," and she was down south. And she said, "I've been telling you and Ben's my husband, you need to do this, and you can have an experience like this too, but you have to work for it, and it's not going to come, it's not going to just happen." And she really piqued my curiosity, and I started researching the Bradley method and ended up back then driving an hour and a half to class every Tuesday night. And it was life-changing. We ended up switching out of the practice we were in over some minor disagreements on the birth plan, mainly having to do with induction of labor, actually. And
wow, so
I
quite late.
What?
It must have been quite late in the pregnancy then that you switched.
It was. I don't remember exactly how many weeks I was, but I was over 30. Probably somewhere between 30 and 35 weeks.
Yeah.
And I loved my doctor. I still do. She's my family doctor to this day. She's my children's pediatrician. But she said, look, if you go this far past your due date, I really have no choice but to induce you or ask you to go somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And based on what I was reading, and based on what I was learning in classes, I felt like I was a low-risk enough candidate that I at least wanted to be open to having conversations about my care.
Mm-hmm.
And she was really doing me a favor by suggesting that I look elsewhere if I wanted the birth that, I had hoped for.
Yeah.
And so that's exactly what I did. And I ended up switching to a birth center in Milford, New Hampshire called the Birth Cottage, which was amazing. Mm-hmm. And I did end up going way past my due date. And I still had a wonderful natural birth that I probably otherwise wouldn't have been able to have had I stayed in the practice I was at.
Wow.
So shortly after that, I became a teacher of the Bradley method.
That's so wonderful. I love that you tell that story because so many women, I think they don't even realize that switching doctors at any point, once they have chosen an OB, that they don't realize that they have the choice to leave and go to a different practice if they want, and especially if they don't feel like their concerns or their requests or their preferences aren't being heard.
Yeah.
I think so many women just don't even realize that that's an option for us, that we can choose, like, you know what, I'm not connecting with this. I don't feel like I have the choice that I want. I'm not being heard here, and so I'm going to investigate some other practices. I love that.
I would say even along those lines, more commonly what I see happening is people making the effort to seek out a doctor whom they really like and spending 9 months having appointments with a doctor who seems to be very much on the same page with their birth plan, but then not getting that doctor when they're actually in labor.
Right.
And that's commonplace in the Boston area and other places in the country. And, women are developing these great relationships with supportive providers, but because solo practitioners are so rare, unless they end up scheduling their birth, they likely will not have the person they've developed this relationship with. And I see that as a real problem.
Yes, yeah. And I know you, as a doula, have some things to help that issue, and we'll talk about it a little bit later on. So it's so exciting.
Okay. Yeah.
But along the lines of the Bradley method, I think a lot of people, maybe they're interested in birth education, but I hear oftentimes, like, why do I need to do some kind of course like that? I feel like when I get there, I'll know what to do, and my body will know what to do. So can you even just give us an idea about what are the types of things? Because I know the Bradley method is pretty extensive, that you can take other birth education courses that are maybe much shorter as far as the time commitment. But can you tell us a little bit about what the Bradley method offers and what you're going to be learning as a participant?
Yes, great question. So the Bradley method is a 12-week class.
Yeah.
And I teach typically in Cambridge. I rent a space on Sunday nights from 7 to 9 p.m. And I also have a smaller home office in Lancaster, Mass., which I'm at now. But we run consecutively for 12 weeks. And because we have so much time together, we're able to cover a lot of information, not only just about natural childbirth, but breastfeeding, good nutrition, creating birth plans, being a good consumer. We have the time to talk about all of the variations and complications that couples could encounter. And I think that's probably one of the big differences is most natural childbirth classes, because they're so much shorter, can really only focus on natural childbirth. And in those cases, I know from the birth trauma coaching that I do, sometimes people feel really unprepared if they've taken a method and, studied for a natural childbirth, and then these variations and complications come up, or even a cesarean becomes necessary, and they feel like they have no idea what they're doing, and they weren't prepared for this in the least. One of the huge benefits of the 12-week class, I think, is that we prepare people for all different scenarios, and just in general about, why someone might take childbirth education. That's a great question. And even though, birth is a very natural process, just like breastfeeding, it still to a certain degree needs to be taught in this culture and this time. And I think that that's because by the time women are of childbearing age and the time couples are having their first babies, most of them haven't been to a birth. They've never even seen a birth. And because of that, it's very foreign to them. It's very scary. And most of what our fears regarding birth come from are how it's portrayed on TV and the movies. People's idea of birth is not realistic because they haven't seen real births. Right. They haven't seen natural births. So because of that, it's important for people to gain a knowledge of what birth is, what it looks like, and especially these poor coaches who are expected to do so much and are put into these places, especially, in the hospital room, expecting to be everything for this mom when they've never even seen a birth before. So I think it's really important nowadays to prepare well for birth. It's really not something you can just wing it nowadays. It really takes preparation and studying. And truthfully, the Bradley method might not be the best fit for everyone. There are other methods out there that may be very good and effective for people. But if your goal is to have a natural childbirth in the hospital setting, I would definitely encourage taking these classes. And that being said, we have people who choose home birth and birth center births. A lot of people at Cambridge Birth Center, and the classes are beneficial for them too. But there's so many hats that the coach needs to wear that it's difficult.
I love the idea that the different options and the different possibilities of things that could come up during birth are discussed ahead of time, because when you're in the middle of labor, it's such an emotional, intense time to make huge, huge decisions that you obviously don't have time to research or think through or talk about with your partner. And so to be able to get some information about those possibilities ahead of time and think through what you might want to do given such and such scenario, I think is enormous value for women.
I do too, and especially just alone all of the newborn procedures that are done right after your baby is born. And, couples shouldn't be having to answer all of these questions from nurses and doctors right after, hey, we're doing this shot, we're doing this to your baby's eyes. Couples should know what those procedures are ahead of time, what they're for, and which ones they can delay, which ones they really need to do right away, if any. Those are things that, like you say, just can't really be or shouldn't be done right after you're holding your baby and bonding with this, little person.
Better things to be doing in that particular moment.
Right. Like bonding and enjoying the time together. That's very well deserved.
Yes, exactly. Well, that's exciting. I love that. And so tell me again, your upcoming class in Cambridge is when?
Yes, I have one starting the first week in October. I think it's October 2nd, that first Sunday in October. And it will run through December either 18th or 20th, whatever that Sunday is.
Okay.
At the end of December. And it's 12 weeks, and we meet right on Ringe Avenue in Cambridge, so very close to you.
Yeah.
And if anybody's interested, they should contact me soon because it's almost full.
Okay.
My classes do fill up very quickly, which is nice. Yeah. But yeah, I know you'll give information on my website, urbanarrivals.com. People can go to.
I absolutely will. And I love your website. It's very easy to read. Lots of really good information for folks. So I'll include it in the little notes under the video. But so I don't know if you have a story prepared, but I want people to know kind of when they take the time to really do the work and kind of prepare themselves and learn about birth and really educate themselves, like what kind of benefits do people see after doing that kind of work? Like how different is their experience as opposed to just kind of going in, assuming that your body will know what to do and assuming that you'll know what to do?
That's a great question. I think one of the benefits I can say from personal experience was I felt like, my husband and I were really able to take this time before our baby was born to put in the work and the information. And I really do think it benefited our relationship. Mm-hmm. And then seeing him be an active participant in the birth of our child is something I'll remember for the rest of my life. And obviously I had 4 more after that. So the proof is in the pudding. But that's a huge reason. It can be an incredibly wonderful and bonding experience for couples and a family. And I want people to know that. I want people to know that birth does not have to be a scary thing. It can be it's life-changing no matter what. It's something you're going to remember for the rest of your life. Every day you will think about your birth experience. Women do. And it's something that can be a wonderful thing that you can look back on, even if variations and complications come up.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think one of the biggest things for birth professionals in this day and age is kind of combating fear and really helping women gain some confidence moving into labor and birth. And so I think that there's so much to get out of these types of birth education classes, especially when they go over different options, when you're talking about postpartum, when you're talking about breastfeeding and bonding and all those sorts of topics. You can just gain so much confidence, and we can combat some of the fear that is just so prevalent these days.
Huge. Knowledge is power when it comes to it. Really, really is.
Totally.
And I certainly believe that. And I've been to a lot of births. I've attended a lot of births as a doula. And most of the time when people do prepare, they are able to get their ideal birth. It's not some unattainable, unrealistic goal. And there are definitely situations where interventions are necessary. I've been by women's side when they've been needed. I've encouraged them at times. Right. But it really helps to have the tools ahead of time and a plan in place for various scenarios.
Yeah, a plan. I like plans.
Yeah, me too. And, plans are pretty controversial, I find. Birth plans in general, a lot of doctors and nurses really frown upon because they say, well, birth can't be planned. Sure. And that's true. Things will happen and things can come up that are unexpected. But if you go in with just nothing, even the example of the newborn procedures is a good one. It just doesn't make sense with the amount of things that happen in the average birth in our country to go in without a plan.
Yeah. I'm with you.
Well, good.
And then, so another thing that you offer is talking to women about VBAC and doing some VBAC coaching, which I think is amazing. And it's, I'm imagining it's kind of the same idea as just kind of thinking through all of the possible scenarios ahead of time and being well versed. But can you tell us a little bit more about that particular situation and how you help women who are preparing, knowing they're going to try to go for a vaginal birth second time around?
It's a great question. So for most women who have had one prior cesarean, depending on certain things like the type of incision and whatnot, for most women, it's arguably safer to attempt a vaginal birth for their second child as opposed to the risks of a repeat cesarean surgery. And it's really up to their individual doctor or midwife to determine whether or not they're a good candidate for a VBAC, which stands for vaginal birth after cesarean, for those who might not be familiar with the term. But what happens is, while a lot of the hospitals in the area claim to be VBAC supportive or VBAC friendly, and there's a difference between supportive and friendly, which I'll get to. You have to know what questions to ask, because some hospitals and some practices will say, we're VBAC supportive, but if you dig a little deeper, it's really, we're only VBAC supportive if you go right before your due date or on your due date, and your contractions are always 5 minutes apart, lasting a minute apiece, and get closer, and you dilate a centimeter an hour, and this and this and this happen.
Which is a very narrow range.
It's a very, and so it's really important for women who are trying for a VBAC to know what questions to ask, to seek out a supportive practitioner, and to seek out a hospital with a high statistic of VBAC success rate. And it's a complicated issue because there are providers who want to be offering VBACs to women, but due to liability reasons with their own insurance carriers can't, have to make the path very narrow and regulated. And it's unfortunate. And then it also comes down to the continuity of care that we were talking about, and what happens if a mom who's trying for a VBAC and hoping for one has this great relationship with her doctor, and then another doctor shows up when she's in labor who isn't supportive.
Right, and might not be as versed in her plan and what the discussion was ahead of time.
That's right, and everything that she's worked for in this journey. You know, I was at a birth a few weeks ago, and something really struck me. It was interesting. At a hospital, I won't say which one, but the mom and I had worked together for 9 months all throughout her pregnancy, and I had a very good understanding as her doula of what she wanted, her preferences, some past trauma she had experienced, and her goals for this birth, and really how hard she had worked for it. And the doctor who came in was not her doctor. It was a different doctor, and he had to flip through her chart to find her name. And then his first question to her was, are you so-and-so? And it really struck me. I thought, it shouldn't be this way. He should know who she is. And this woman has a story to tell. And she's fought so hard for this birth. And it made me sad to think that the provider didn't know the deep history of this woman. And it made me very happy to be there. And she did end up getting her ideal birth. But, I read something recently somewhere that said the only stranger you should meet at your birth is your baby.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Oh, my God.
And that really, hit home for me. And I believe that. And it's one of the reasons that I became a doula, is to try. I noticed a gap in our healthcare system around birth, and especially in the hospital system, where most women feel most comfortable to birth. And the gap has to do with continuity of care and women developing relationships with their practitioners and then being really left on their own come labor. And some women really do have this idea, and couples who aren't educated about the process, that that their doctor will be with them the whole time during the birth. And that's just not the case. They're lucky if it's their doctor, and their doctor will probably come in at the very end when it's time to push. But their primary interaction will be with their labor and delivery nurse, who they don't get to know ahead of time, and who doesn't know their plan and their history. So I noticed the need for that, and it bothered me when I saw many of my students and friends and other people having, their expectations not being met at their births, and feeling like they weren't well informed about the reality of what would happen. And so that's why I actually became a doula. It was after I became a childbirth educator, to try to be that person for someone, and they could know that I would be there at their side during the birth, no matter which nurse they got, no matter which doctor was on call.
Right. they'll have that consistency in the
Yeah.
process. And so that kind of is a perfect segue into my next question, which is really to ask you a little bit more about your doula practice.
Right.
And I know that you have kind of a unique setup with a couple of other doulas that you have partnership with. So
Yes.
tell us a little bit about what is unique about, because I know when patients or when clients kind of call you to sign up and ask for you to be their doula, they get something a little bit different than they might get with other doulas. So tell us a little bit about what the...
Right. So the difference is I work in a partnership with another doula.
Yeah.
Two doulas in particular. One is Ashley Bennett in Medford, who teaches Bradley classes in Arlington. And another is Pamela Gaw, who is a DONA-trained doula, who lives out in my area, but also attends births in the Boston area as well. And when I was a solo practitioner as a doula, as all doulas do, we have a contract, and in that contract, it basically says we'll show up for your birth.
Yeah.
But, and what we do and what we don't do. But there's always a section that says you're guaranteed a named backup doula. And that would be in the case of an emergency where I couldn't make it, which never happened, or the case of an overlapping birth, which could happen even when you take few clients in a given month. Sometimes people go weeks early or weeks late. So that clause was always there, and I never had to utilize my backups, but I was never quite comfortable that they weren't in on all the meetings with my clients. And I also felt like if there comes a day where I have to send somebody to the birth, even though I love these doulas, who they've never met, that's not really continuity of care, and that's not really what I believe in. And how can we make this so that they are developing a relationship with both of us, and both of us are being compensated for our time and all of that. So it was always a thought that I had. And, the arrangement used to be that the clients could meet with Pam. Pam I've been working with a little longer, to however often they wanted, but rarely they would, because they'd say, how often would you, do you miss a birth? It's like, well, never. And they're like, okay, well, we're good. Maybe we'll Skype or talk with her on the phone once.
Yeah.
But what I've done now is I'll take repeat clients individually, but any other births I take only with Ashley or with Pam. And so you pretty much are paying for one doula, but getting two.
Right.
And if I'm working with Ashley, we will meet with the client together at all the meetings.
Amazing.
We'll go over the birth plans with them, and we'll do the postpartum visit together as well. And then at the birth, they're guaranteed one of us, but in most cases we'll get two of us. And whether that means we're there together, or Ashley's there first, and after 24 hours or so, I fill in and they get a fresh doula. It works beautifully. I'll give you one quick example.
Yeah.
Pam and I had a client that we shared, and she went to the birth first for the first part of it. Yeah. And it ended up being a very, very long birth, and I said, why don't I come and fill in for the pushing? And we were thinking that the pushing would be really, really fast, or at least not like 24 or 30 hours. And it wasn't. But this mom, she had an epidural, and she required two people to hold her legs for pushing. Yeah. And I'm convinced that she had a vaginal birth because she had a fresh doula in there who was willing to and slept enough to hold up her leg for 9-10 hours with another amazing dedicated nurse. But it became so clear in that situation, there's tons that stand out, but why a partnership was so beneficial and worked so well. And this client, I think, really got the best of, both worlds, and getting both of us there was huge.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Massive
we have
benefit.
Other example.
Well, I feel like I would love to listen to all of them, but we should try to keep this short if we can for folks. But I feel like you've given so much good information, so many tips and trips about like what is beneficial for folks as far as having a doula and as far as getting some birth education, why Bradley method might be right for somebody in particular. So I just thank you so much for being with me today and for
having me.
Yeah, well,
and thank you for all the work you do, too.
Oh, well, thank you so much. It is my pleasure, and I love that we get to share clients all the time. It's just, it's the best. So,
well, thanks, Amy.
You are very welcome, and I can't wait to see you soon, and have a great afternoon.
Thanks again.
Bye, Rebecca.
Bye.